This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to call our February 28th meeting to order. We do have a full agenda. We have a workshop right after this, so if we can move to a reasonable pace, I'd appreciate it. Everyone's had a chance to look at the minutes from our January 16th. Any questions or comments? The motion to accept the minutes as presented. I can do that. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Old business. Really, there's nothing. We have the workshops right after this for the 1920 budget. Expenditure reports. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one comment. And it's on, it's the page, let's try page 11.
Okay.
We just have consultants. I just need to know, do we send that out for bid, or do we have a go-to guy? Because I see he's used in a couple of departments.
What's under fire?
No, I'm looking at under Public Works. I thought I saw the same consultant in another.
Oh, there's two or three consultants that work over in Public Works.
They're not, they're outside contract?
Yes.
Yeah, they're in the building department. So when our staff is overloaded, like Amazon, we have we've had a full-time person just at the Amazon site.
I misunderstood.
So these are building officials. Some of them retired, some are outside contractors that help with the overflow and all the economic development we have in terms of the inspections. So.
All right, I understand now. I thought we individually went out and got them for that particular function, and then when they were
No, I
through
think
it-
there's two regular gentlemen that work, plus
Okay.
the third for the Amazon project.
Thank you.
I have a question, page 7. If you look at, and I think I brought this up last month, the maintenance and repair town building, we have maintenance and repair rental, we're over, and then then there's utilities that are over, and if you look at the percentage used, it's quite high. So are we going to expect that this department's going to go over? And what are all these repairs on buildings and rental? Can we get like a list of?
Yeah, I could give you that.
One of the things, Diane, is we had to put a new roof on the Historical Society. The roof, the original roof, which was slate, was leaking profusely with torrential downpours down through the chimney. So we had, there was a major expense on that we had to take care of.
Would that tie into the furniture purchase, or is that something else?
No, that wouldn't be anything regarding
All right,
furniture.
That's what we were sitting on.
Well, I mean, just in general, that line's over too, so that's, and just noticing it's
There was a huge expense for the boiler for Town Hall, too. That's in this whole figure.
boiler?
Yeah.
All right. But what
That
about,
was over 20 years old, and we just had to replace it because it was just breaking down all the time.
what are we doing with the rental property maintenance as well? I guess that's probably, I don't know.
I'd have to get the detail on that.
All right, could we?
But I know we've had to repair a few things here and there.
All right.
Yeah, one of our rental properties, we had a tree growing out of the chimney. So we had to address that right away. I'm serious, this is what happens. So these are older buildings, particularly the rental properties. We have several of them, and we have to do the regular improvements. So Ellen works very closely with us downstairs and facilitates the contractors and the repairs and the hiring of those people.
Yeah, it'd be nice to just see a list, because I don't know all of what these rental properties are. If we could get that.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else on expenditures? Revenue?
Excuse me, so are we not doing the personal property tax audits, sorry?
No, we are doing them. If there's nothing on the line, that Gary just hasn't
Right.
started that project yet.
Anything else on revenue? Special funds? and Board of Ed.
Rich, can I just go back one second? Were you talking about the revenue side? Oh, it probably ends up right in the property tax, interest and liens, and then towards the end of the year, I just make an adjustment to put the right number in there.
We're ahead on a couple of categories there. Supplemental auto, but that's probably not it, right?
What's that?
It wouldn't be in supplemental auto, right? Because that's
No,
ahead,
no.
right?
Board of Ed or special funds? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept the reports as presented?
Make that motion?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution on debt service. Ed, do you want to take us through it, or
Yeah,
does anybody have any questions on it? Have you read the resolution? Maybe I should start it out. Has everyone read the resolution?
Yeah.
Any questions for Ed on it?
Pretty understandable.
Sure. Ed, you want to give just your cliff notes on it?
yeah, what I was looking to do was set up a debt service fund, and I worked with the town attorney, the bonding attorney, Glenn Rybacki, and our auditor, Joe Santafonte from O'Connor Davies, and we're trying to establish a separate debt service fund where the premiums for the bonds that we've issued would be put into the fund, and those premiums can be used to pay off the debt as we go along. And it's better to use, we're trying to use the money now. I mean, the money would stay in that, our capital project until the project was over, and then revert to the general fund anyway. But right now, when the debt is high, we could use the premiums to offset some of the cost of the debt.
Okay.
Just further amplifying this.
Sure.
So the advantage of this is when Ed and I go out to sell bonds, because the paper is highly rated and because of the fact we have, at times, one time we had 15 companies bid on our paper. So we collect these bond premiums. So Ed and I have been keeping that aside, and he just explained what he's been doing. And the advantage of it, as we are at this point in time, is the fact that I may have said it last time, that when we see a new building go up in town, like the middle school, that doesn't mean it's already paid for. We have to start paying for it. So the advantage of this resolution is to allow us the ability to mitigate the escalating debt as a result of the middle school, still paying off the high school, still paying off some of the fire departments, and now with the police department renovation.
Right.
So the debt projected would have gone up to $9.4 million in this budget, from about $6.8 million. So this debt service fund that we're talking about helps us in this budget year to minimize the debt that would have normally jumped about $2.8 million.
Right.
Any questions for Ed? We just make a motion to accept the resolution?
That's it.
Or do we need, we don't have to, we have to read the whole thing into the record? Okay,
Or at least the first paragraph.
at least the first paragraph.
I'll be happy to read.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for the following resolution. A resolution creating a debt service fund for the payment of principal and interest on obligations issued for current and future capital projects and other tax-exempt purposes. Whereas the town's compliance with statement number 54 of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board requires in part that the creation of new funds be formally established by the town's governing body. Whereas the town has previously issued bonds, notes, or other obligations to finance capital projects and anticipates issuing bonds, notes, and other obligations for future capital projects. Whereas the town has received and anticipates receiving premiums on the issuance of the obligations. Whereas generally accepted accounting principles require the town to use such premiums to pay principal and interest on the obligations and other obligations issued by the town. Whereas the town wishes to create a debt service fund for the payment of the debt service and other tax-exempt purposes, and whereas the town shall deposit such premiums into the debt service fund for this purpose, and shall use such premiums to pay debt service before using other funds deposited into the account. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of North Haven hereby creates a new fund to be called the Debt Service Fund, to be used for the payment of debt service on bonds, notes, and other obligations issued for current and future capital projects and other tax-exempt purposes.
I'll second that resolution. All in favor? Aye. Yes?
Yeah, I just want, obviously, this resolution may have changed very slightly in that I believe that myself and Pat Brown have a longer version with more paragraphs.
Dated 2/20?
Okay, maybe Tim just read the abbreviated version?
That's the one I got.
Because that,
Yeah,
because,
I have.
Yeah, mine
it did not match.
wasn't verbatim of what Tim was
I
reading.
mean,
It's longer than mine.
2 of us have a shorter version of it.
Yeah, I have a shorter version.
3 of us have a shorter version.
Mine's dated
Yeah.
2/20.
That's it.
was that
That's the
to cut a
latest
couple
version.
minutes off our meeting?
Is there a difference between those 2 versions at all?
No, Tim read the version that Ellen has. right
Yes,
there.
which is what I have.
Right.
And what
Shorter
Diane has.
version.
I have a date.
I have an entirely different one.
Yeah, you have it.
I thought he was ad-libbing going through it, that's why.
2 pages, he only read the second page, so,
There's a first page to this?
First page?
let's see what happens.
Whatever Ellen has there should is the one that should be read.
Excuse me.
I think the missing items are just more of the
Tim read the
salient
second page.
facts and not necessarily.
I don't have the,
Mine- I don't have the first page.
and I don't have the long page either.
Pass that to Tim, and I'll give everybody.
Tim read the
You don't
second.
have the second, I don't have the first.
Yeah, I don't have the first either.
But it started out, the topic, the heading was fine.
Well, that was
I
it.
think we have different versions.
No, there's 2 pages.
Oh, there's 2 pages.
I have the short, you have the long.
Oh, I didn't get this, I didn't get the second
Photographic
page.
copy.
The second page, no, this is a,
No, actually, it's 2, yeah. I'm confused, this is.
Well, we'll continue that resolution with,
the second page or is?
yes, there's 2
Read, can I
pages.
make it, read the first page, the one
That's
in
it.
Tim's right hand. That's the one to be read.
Continuing the same resolution.
Right.
Is it the same resolution or?
Same resolution.
But it's page 1.
There's 2 pages of same resolution.
which
You
one?
read page 2 first, now I'll read page 1. Doesn't make a difference in the order.
I think this is revised. This is.
I didn't have page 1.
Tim, read. All right. Folks, Tim, read the first page. That's the resolution. Please read it.
This
Read the
I make a motion for the following resolution. A resolution creating a debt service fund for the payment of principal and interest on obligations issued for the middle school project, the police department project, and other tax-exempt purposes. Whereas the town's compliance with statement number 54 of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board requires, in part, that the creation of new funds be formally established by the town's governing body. Whereas pursuant to a resolution adopted at an adjourned town meeting June 17th of 2014, the town approved an appropriation and bond authorization for the design and construction of a new middle school. Whereas pursuant to a resolution adopted at an adjourned town meeting on October 25th of 2016, the town approved an appropriation and bond authorization for the design and construction of renovations to the police department facilities and communications equipment upgrades. Whereas the town has or anticipates issuing bonds, notes, or other obligations to finance the middle school project and the police department project. Whereas the town has or anticipates receiving premiums on the issuance of the obligations. Whereas generally accepted accounting principles require the town to use such premiums to pay principal and interest on the obligations and tax-exempt obligations issued by the town. Whereas the town wishes to create a debt service fund for the payment of debt service on bonds, notes, and other obligations issued for current and future projects and other tax-exempt purposes. And whereas the town shall deposit such premiums into the debt service fund for this purpose, and shall use such premiums to pay debt service before using other funds deposited into the account. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of North Haven hereby creates a new fund to be called the Debt Service Fund, to be used for the payment of debt service on bonds, notes, and other obligations issued for the middle school project, the police department project, future projects, and other tax-exempt purposes.
That does seem to cover it all.
That gives a preamble and more historical reference to the second page that Tim read, so that...
Is the resolution.
Call for the vote.
All right, I'll second the resolution. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is there a page 3?
No.
We have one more resolution. Since you did that. Resolved that the Board of Selectmen call a special town meeting to take action on the acceptance of this recommendation and increase the bid limit from $7,500 to $25,000. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
That was recommended by our auditor.
Yes. Public comment, before we go to public comment, the only other thing I wanted to mention is you do have a revised schedule for the public hearing and the annual budget town meeting. Just wanted to just make note of it. It's highlighted in red. Ellen passed it out at tonight's packet. Other than that, public comment.
Sir?
Yes.
I just had some comments to make.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And I wanted to get a copy of, from FEMA, the Assistant to Firefighters Grant Program. This describes a lot of the questions and answers I have with regard to the SAFER grant. The SAFER grant program that helps subsidize new hires of firemen in fire departments across the United States. We have to sort of establish a position on fire during this February meeting because FEMA offers this SAFER grant program, which reduces the initial cost of new firefighters, but with an application period of February 15th to March 22nd. So, we're here to solve problems on this board, and there's questions in town on the adequacy of our fire and medical services. While the study group that we formed did develop numerous recommendations to improve the safety and quality and capacity of our fire department's ability to respond to emergencies, the manpower, and I say that in a general neutral sense, a gender-neutral sense. The manpower aspect of the department is seen as the most impactful variable which would effectively improve the service. So Chief Januszewski and Deputy Chief Marcus, I believe, have made a valid case for additional personnel for both a second dedicated paramedic unit and a second fully staffed water-carrying fire suppression apparatus. They've made a valid case. We've tried at times to target improved manpower with regard to certain shifts or certain times of day, but that has seemed to be an option that's unacceptable to the fire union and the fire chief. So, as I say, we're here to solve problems, and I believe that the first selectman and this board has been sort of gravitating toward the idea of a gradual approach of adding 2 firefighters per year for the next 3 years to get to that next plateau. That'll allow all fire shifts to run a second pumper truck. If we utilize this SAFER grant, and as I say, the application period is from now to March 22nd. If we utilize the SAFER grant, 6 firemen can be added in year 1, this next fiscal year, at a cost that is significantly less than adding 2 fully paid firefighters per year for the next 3 years. So I'm asking that we budget for 2 additional firefighters in the upcoming budget, but I ask the first selectman to authorize the fire chief to apply for the SAFER grant, and if awarded, hire 6 more firefighters in the next fiscal year.
So I spoke with the chief today, and he's not on board with the SAFER grant. He'd prefer to see us try to position 2 per year. This grant, to try to file it now, would require so much work that he could possibly not be able to make the deadline. It may require him to go down to Washington DC as part of this grant. And based upon the conversation I had with him today, he likes the approach of trying to go 2 per year. And that 2 per year allows us the flexibility in light of what could be an uncertain state budget to analyze every year what our state funding is to make the appropriate expenditures or not make the appropriate expenditures. You're technically correct, the SAFER grant in the first couple of years will cost us less, but at some point in time, we have to fully fund it.
Right. Yes, and it was my understanding that this board did like his presentation enough to add 2 more per year for the next 3 years.
So after we spoke yesterday, Michael, when I said to you all options are on the table, I said to you I was going to talk to the chief, and I did today, and he would prefer us to go in the other direction, 2 per year.
So Mike, if I understand what you said earlier about you're recommending a second dedicated medical unit, a second water carrying unit, so that's a total of 8 individuals, correct?
2 per shift, yes.
Well, how much is the total hire for those?
The total cost of hiring those?
No, the total number of individuals, isn't that 8 people?
Has 8 people. Right. 2 more have come on board in this current year, midway through the year. So we have 6 to go.
And that's close to $1 million of salary.
And the cost per firefighter, Mrs. Swinkowski, is?
140,
140. All right, the chief seemed to think it was 120.
or 120.
No, it's 120. It's 120, right.
Well, at 120,000 per firefighter, the cost for all 3 years, of the next 3 years, the cost to the town would be $828,000. If we hire 2 more per year for the next 3 years, the 3-year cost, this isn't the annual cost, it's the cost in the next 3 years of adding those people at that time is $1,440,000. So I was just trying to save the town $600,000 by applying for the SAFER grant. Is there any chance he actually could fulfill the requirements of the SAFER application in the next month?
I think it's going to be pretty tight for him. I think it's going to be a struggle for that to be finalized by March 15th.
He said he was waiting for your okay to go ahead on this.
Well, I spoke with him today, and, you know, I mean, I understand the mathematics that you're saying, but I think the fire commission's on board with the 2 per year also.
Just remember now, 2 per year does not get us where he wants or where we think that the public would be safely covered on every day until the 3rd year, until all 6 have been hired. Because you'll have occasional 24-hour shifts without this new capacity.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if we need to decide this tonight, you know, because the referendum's in, I think.
Well, the
third
only
week of
reason
May.
why it was decided tonight is that if you do add 6, do it with the SAFER grant, you'll save money. And you'll solve the problem. We're here to solve problems. This solves the problem.
There's also a structural issue absorbing all the firefighters up front from an operational standpoint that the chief brought up to me today. That puts a lot of strain on the operations trying to integrate 6 new firefighters right away. So, look, I understand what you're saying.
Well, he
on the
asked for
mathematics.
16 last year. He asked for 16 or 8, so I'm sure he can somehow fit in 6 at the same time.
Well, I'm not prepared to make any decisions on this tonight. None. We'll continue the discussion.
It's 8 though, right, Mike? It's not 6, it's 8.
We have 2 already.
Well, just because we agreed in conceptually, I guess, to put it
technically
in,
going
doesn't mean
into
they're
next-
not part of this picture, right? They are.
Well, the 2 are in training right now. The next 6 wouldn't be in training until the awards are given.
I understand it's an
between
incremental system.
July,
I understand
right,
that.
July and, yeah. Yeah, so it's 2 more per shift.
But effectively,
Yes.
we've given them the first 2 of the 8 that we're talking about.
He has them.
Yes.
Right, he's got it, right. So I'm willing to keep the discussion open, but I'm not making any decisions on this tonight.
I still want to see what the state's going to do before we commit.
Yeah, I mean,
And there's other items that
to-
we have to do as well.
To that point, you know, this is another thing, you know, A lot of people come to me, they want certain things. I have to look at the big picture. Right now, we're contending with a possible teacher's pension allocation back to the towns. That's not in this budget right now. So we've got to wait to see how the state budget is going to play out, how it relates to the teacher's pension, how it relates to revenue items that we have been getting in the past, how it relates to the pilot reimbursements. You know, there's initiatives on car taxes. Just so that you know, the general public, if you're hearing about the car tax, if that bill goes through, it's going to cost North Haven $7 million. $7 million of cash flow out of the system. Additionally, if this bill goes through, between that car tax and the $50,000 exemption, $22 million worth of revenue are going to go out of North Haven's budget. $22 million. $750 million of grand list value would leave North Haven. So this is why I'm not going to make any decisions tonight until we get a better handle on what the funding is, where the teacher's pension is going to go, and how it relates to some of the issues that we're faced with, specifically car tax. Remember that number. $7 million gets flushed out of North Haven if that car tax goes to the state. And remember this number. If those bills go through, $22 million worth of revenue out the door here in North Haven, if those bills go through.
Mike, can you give me your numbers again? So what was your estimated cost over 3 years for the SAFER grant?
820.
Is that right?
With the SAFER grant, the 3-year cost of the added 6 firefighters, with the SAFER grant, $828,000.
And what did you estimate it was without it?
$1,440,000.
And your first number does not include the equipment, right? Because there's 2 pieces of equipment that will be required for these firefighters, right?
Correct.
And that was $800,000 to $1 million, right? That was $800,000 to $1 million, right?
Well, they are already receiving another fire truck at this next referendum, at this next town meeting, if
Yes.
it's approved.
That's right.
Well, that's a replacement of the one they're having problems with,
Yeah.
right? I mean, but you need a new EMT vehicle, if I recollect his presentation, and you need another one for this.
He said he has applied for a grant for another piece of fire equipment.
Yes, he has. That's right.
Mike, that 828, does that include full-dressed firemen
No.
with scuba gear?
That's just their,
Their salary?
that's just their salary. You'd have another $3,500 to $4,000 for equipment, and you would probably average, if we were going to maintain that engine company, would probably average somewhere around $35,000 in overtime per guy.
Well, the 140 is inclusive of
No.
the overtime.
That's all in
The
cost, right?
120 is their base salary with benefits. To cover their vacation, to cover their sick time,
Right.
the average
Probably
is
said
about $35,000 to $40,000. So when it all really shakes out, you're probably looking at somebody that's costing about $160,000 a year. Again, assuming you're going to maintain that engine company when those guys are on vacation. You know, it's one thing if a guy's out, if you don't backfill for him, that's fine. But if you're going to start backfilling for him, which I think that your intention is to maintain that engine, you're
Yeah.
probably looking at, $35,000 to $40,000 in overtime per man as well.
Well, the benefits I know are included in the
The
SAFER
benefits are
grant
there, the
application.
overtime is not.
Yeah, but just if you want to save money just in year one at $140,000 a man, the cost to us, of course, of adding 2 more men is $280,000.
3, 4.
With the SAFER grant, the cost of adding 6 men is $210,000. You save $70,000 on the first year.
Okay, what are your second year numbers showing, Michael, on that?
Second year, it's the same because it's once,
the
well,
third year
it's not
one.
the same. It's
Basically
an even
goes up.
greater savings because
No, it's not. That would be
Well,
great.
let
I'm sorry.
me finish, good. Second year, Michael, what are the numbers?
yeah, the SAFER subsidy percentages have changed since we received this grant with paramedics.
Yep.
It's 75% again in year 2.
And year 3, what do the numbers look like?
Year 3, it's 35%. So year 3, $546,000 that year, as opposed to if you have all all 6 firefighters, $840,000. So you save money each and every year.
And in year 4, what does it look like?
Year 4, it's a full cost.
Full cost.
Full cost.
6 times 120.
Yeah.
720.
It's 6 times 140 or 120?
120.
Oh, 120. 1 million, I'm sorry, 720,000.
So if you added up 720 and the other 3 previous years, what would your total amount be
Under this scenario,
under Michael's scenario?
$1,548,000.
$1,548,000.
828 plus 720, Mike. Right, your 828 number, that's the number you gave us, right? That's your 3-year number, was 828.
828,
Plus
yeah.
720.
Okay, so what's that number, 1,500,000?
1,548,000.
All right, and the Safer Grants, how many years?
3.
3.
History.
3. So if you amortize average the cost out that way versus what the chief is recommending, what would the numbers look like?
390.
If it's 390, the average cost of adding 2 men each year is 480. So, save 9,000 years.
Your 480 number is what, Mike?
For 3 men.
It goes from 240 to 480 to 720.
Right.
So the average of those is 480.
Right.
I mean, this is really discussion when we're putting the budget together, but
Right.
I understand that there's concern that the SAFER grant needs to be applied now, but if he's saying he can't do it, is that his position?
Well, I think it's a struggle.
The
I
whole
mean,
period, the application period started in on February 15th.
Right.
So we haven't lost that much time.
Lost about a week, right? Well, look, as I said, I'm not prepared to make any decisions on the SAFER grant. In the discussions with the chief today, it was 2 per year in a sustained fashion. That allows us to analyze what could possibly be a descending level of state aid, but it also allows us to analyze the appreciation, which I've said many times before, the grant list is going to continue to grow here. So, but
There's a
look,
practical problem too here, Mike. You know, I mean, even if you got your wish and we all said, let's go ahead and do it, we can't pass the budget here. If the budget ever got turned down, we would have approved an expenditure of 720. That would have
No,
been
I said budget for 2 additional firefighters. And then we have enough in the budget to cover our portion of 6 firefighters if we do get the SAFER grant. So there really is we actually save money if we get the SAFER grant.
look, I'm not arguing with your numbers. I'm just arguing with the approach. You know, what is the better approach, okay? Like I said to you when we spoke yesterday afternoon, I did speak with the chief, and he prefers to go in this direction, the one that, over the course of time, adds 2 per year. But we'll keep the dialogue open. I don't think we need to decide it tonight, and...
No, if you can decide over the next week, that's fine with me.
Well,
You know,
Well, Mike,
we
why
just-
don't you send us your numbers, your analysis?
Okay.
I would like to see your analysis instead of I'm trying to write down numbers and we keep digressing, so it'd be helpful to just see your numbers, what
yeah,
you're
why don't we do
thinking.
that? That's a good
I
suggestion.
will get them out.
All right, that's good. I'll go along with that. That's good.
Board members have anything else? Public comment? Here.
Good evening, Nancy Barrett, Crestview Drive. My parents always taught me to start with a place of gratitude, so I'd just like to personally thank the Board of Finance members for their efforts to ask insightful questions during all of the budget workshops, all of the presentations, and your attempts to understand the subtleties that distinguish the departments and the reasons behind specific budget requests and their relative priority. It's come to my attention that recently the Board of Finance has come under criticism for their questions as evidence of micromanagement or attempts to undermine the experts. So I would just like to say thank you. And I would ask the people of North Haven, would you really want to live in a town in which the Board of Finance stopped asking questions and assign funding based on some, random algorithm that you assign to a computer. So I personally wouldn't. So your lives would be much easier if you just rushed everyone through their presentations and didn't ask any questions. But I personally appreciate the fact that you take the time to ask the questions. And in fact, there was a question back in the August Board of Finance meeting as to whether you actually have the expertise to make some of these questions, such as the fire department staffing. And I think Tim said, we, the Board of Finance, make decisions all of the time about different departments here. And he said, while I'm not an expert in what social workers do here, or I'm not an expert in the police department, nor is anyone else on this board, ultimately we have to make reasoned judgments based on data about how much to allocate, and ultimately they have to, through the budget process, provide services to the town. So I greatly appreciate that approach, and no, you do not need to be experts, but I appreciate the fact that you do communicate with all of the experts and ask very detailed questions. So along those same lines, I'd like to say thank you and single out Mr. Monaco and Mr. Hallahan for all of their hard work on the Fire and Medical Services Workshop. The information gleaned from all of your meetings and hard work will inform both this Board of Finance as well as the general public. I think you brought into light a lot of issues, the subtleties of running the fire department that I personally found not only interesting but incredibly informative, and I appreciated your attention to detail and your thoughtful and practical recommendations designed to benefit the town in your report. Ultimately, going back to the August Board of Finance meeting, I agree completely with what Mr. Monaco had said when he said, quote, I don't feel the town at this point is in jeopardy with medical. And as far as equipment, the Board of Finance has approved over $13 million in the past few years for the fire department. Again, I'm just speaking for myself. In my opinion, there is no objective evidence that verifies either a staffing shortage in the North Haven Fire Department or a related public safety crisis. In fact, one could argue that the fire chief and the fire commission's proposal for incremental growth is actually proof that there is no crisis that warrants immediate intervention. You can't have it both ways. You can't say there's a crisis, but we can take care of it very slowly over time. Either there's a crisis or there isn't. And if there isn't, then let's actually approach this in a logical way in which those priorities are weighed against the priorities of all of the other departments. And I think that it's very important that all of our elected officials, and most importantly, the taxpayers, understand a very important concept. In most areas of business, if you increase your staffing pool, it is reasonable to assume that your overtime expenditures will decrease. But in fact, for all of our first responders, if you increase the number of firefighters and police officers, that by definition, we will increase our expenditures for overtime, holidays, and what's referred to as contractual replacement. So if a firefighter calls in sick or goes on vacation or is injured in the line of duty and is collecting workman's compensation or is away on military duty, their shifts have to be covered and the people covering them have to be compensated at time and a half. So the people of North Haven really need to understand this. I can't tell you the number of people that don't understand and think, oh, if we just hire more firefighters, we'll recoup that investment in the reduction of overtime. And we just won't. I mean, currently, we're spending about $900,000 in overtime and holiday and contractual replacement for the police and a little over $1 million for the fire department. And that does not include the 2 additional firefighters. So that's it in terms of my statements. And I do have a couple of questions. And this is for the entire Board of Finance, so to the extent that you want to address this individually or collectively. It's a 2-part question. Last spring, when the Board of Finance was finalizing the 2018-19 current fiscal year budget, was it your understanding that the $140,000 included in the current budget under the generic line safety issues, under the category personnel policy issues, was it your understanding that money would be specifically earmarked for the hiring of 2 career firefighters to be scheduled at the discretion of the fire chief. And so that's the question, part 1. And then if no, what was your understanding about the intended usage of that money? So you can start at either end. Just
It goes through the chair first. If there's someone who wants to comment, they
Sure.
can comment. But
Of course.
we set money aside for public safety related to the fire department. We don't have jurisdiction, just like we don't have jurisdiction over the Board of Ed. Their commissions have ultimate to take our recommendations, modify our recommendations, implement our recommendations.
Okay.
I still always thought that adding and I still to this day, and think that adding gear to the engine, paramedic gear, would be a good thing.
I agree with you.
But the commission says no, and it is their call. We can only go so far.
Sure.
We made the recommendations, we set some money aside. They took one of our recommendations, modified it to meet their needs, and implemented it.
Right. Yep, well, he made over 23 recommendations, so.
Yeah, and some of them didn't cost anything.
Right, yeah, and I appreciate that. But was it your understanding specifically, when it was first presented to you, that this money would be intended to hire 2 firefighters, or used for whatever the work group would recommend that was under $140,000?
The money was intended for the fire department. I think that was the overall intention. And we intended to make recommendations to them. But it is that commission that sets policy. We don't set policy. We make a recommendation, here's the money to implement these recommendations. And it turns out that they took one of our recommendations, modified the time frame. I liked our time frame better, but it's not our decision, it's their decision.
Right.
I guess I always looked at it as a placeholder.
Yeah, but that's it. It was a
That's why I was-
placeholder for the
Oh,
money.
it was definitely a placeholder for the fire department. I was just wondering if you were under the impression that it was a placeholder specifically to hire 2
Believe me,
firefighters.
just like the fire department, just like the police department, just like the Board of Ed. There's boards and commissions that oversee those entities. We don't, less with the Board of Ed, but we don't control where their policy is. You know, the chief runs the department, the fire commission, police commission set the policies. No other, they're protected by state statute.
Right.
There's not a lot we can do there. I would love for the Board of Ed to answer more directly to this board. I think that would be a...
Right, well, I think that's why the Board of Ed budget is separate, but all of the other towns that report indirectly to this...
It may be a different pocket, it's still the same pair of pants.
Right, no, I've heard that.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, taxpayers paying for it. So.
Right, but back in just September, Mr. Frieda had said that he made it clear that once the report is completed, the town has $140,000 that we can spend on the recommendations,
140
meaning
or
from the...
120, 140?
It was 140. Whatever the recommendations of the work group may be, they cannot exceed $140,000 that we put into the budget that was intended to commission this work group, which is working very well together in a bipartisan fashion. Now,
That's
to me,
correct.
that sounds like the money
exceed
is
it.
set aside for what the work group has recommended, not what the fire commission has recommended.
They used
that the
it
way-
They used it for what we recommended. They did hire the 2 firemen that we recommended. They
That's
just
not what you
modified it.
recommended. You recommended weighted day duty, and they said, thank you, but we'll do whatever we want. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we cannot dictate, again, to the fire commission. We made a recommendation for them to have 2 men. We liked our time frame better. Made a recommendation, put paramedic equipment on the engine. They didn't take that. I'm assuming they took, Michael, did we say they took like 11 or so of our other recommendations that didn't cost money?
I haven't looked at the number, but yes, they've implemented
But
some.
it's their policy.
They're going to implement other portions of it, but no, the roadblock was the...
State statute.
was the 24-hour shifts that they would not make an exception for with new hires.
Right.
And that might be something that needs to be discussed when their contracts come up again.
Of course.
So then what do you think was the actual purpose of the work group? If ultimately the fire commission can
To
make the
produce what we
decision,
produced.
right?
It was always, the decision, the policy always had to be implemented by the fire department. Just like if it was
No,
something
no,
we
of course
did-
it has to be implemented, but ultimately, it sounds like the decision was
It
made
is.
by the fire
By state
commission.
statute, it's their decision.
Right.
Just like it would be the police chief's decision in his department, we're picking on him because he's here to present his budget. Just like the Board of Ed, once we give them their dollars, we don't control it anymore.
Right. So it's just, that wasn't my takeaway from what Mr. Frieda said in September or what was said during the budget presentation back in last spring. It really sounded
If
like,
the verbiage wasn't clear, I mean, I think most board members realize that the fire commission, the police commission, the Board of Ed, once funds are allocated to them, have control of those funds. They have they're, by state statute, I mean, that's their job.
I'm very clear on it. They came up with 23 recommendations. They took one of the recommendations and they modified the work schedule. For the 7th time, I'll say it, the same thing I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting. They took one of the recommendations, they modified the hours. That is their right and that is their responsibility. So I'm very clear on this. And I think everyone else here is pretty clear too. 23 recommendations. The Fire Commission actually gave the Board of Finance Subcommittee credit for coming up with some good recommendations. They didn't take all the recommendations. They took one of them. The 2 firefighters, but they have the right to modify the schedule. And that's it.
Mr. Monaco, were the results and recommendations of the Fire and Medical Services Workshop ever formally presented to either the members of the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen at the end of October, as you had originally?
They were given
Proposed.
to the Board of Selectmen, they were given to all members.
So the report was given to them, but it wasn't presented?
We discussed it in the Board of Finance meeting, I believe, at one time. We've talked about it so many times.
Right.
Yeah, Michael actually read the whole thing.
I did go over it.
He read it.
Okay, so I'm just asking, I don't know, I
Oh,
wasn't
no,
there.
we did, and we
so-
sent it to the Board of Selectmen, and we
Yeah.
sent it to the Fire Commission.
Right, no, I know you sent out the
It
report,
went
I'm
over,
just
we went
asking.
over it more in detail at
Right.
the fire workshop,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's right. That's where, was that? Yeah, that was what it was. Because the chief was here at the time.
I'm glad, because I think that that's when it's most useful, is when the 2 people plus the chief who have actually done all of the work can actually present the results rather than just hand out the report.
Yeah, no, we went
So you
through it
can
at the workshop,
field the questions.
every item.
Okay. And Mr. Frieda, during the period of time between the budget referendum vote on May 15th of 2018 and the release of the Fire and Medical Services Workgroup report on November 14th of 2018, did you tell either the fire chief or the fire commissioners or any of the firefighters that the $140,000 would be used to hire 2 additional firefighters?
Could have been one of the options, yeah. It could have been a number of options to include the 2 firefighters, yes.
But did you tell them definitively that it would be used for that?
No, it's one of the options. I just
No, I
said
know
it.
it's one of the
So let me
options.
repeat it again. It was one of many options to include 2 firefighters.
I'm aware. I am aware.
So if
I
you're
just-
aware, why are you asking the question?
I'm asking if you told them, yes,
I told them it
that's how
could be
would
one of
used.
the options.
Okay. All right. I was told that you did, in fact, promise them that that's how it would be
I
used.
would have endorsed it if there was their recommendation, of course. It goes back to what we said. Once they come in with a recommendation, I'm going to endorse the recommendation.
Right.
And it ended up to be 2 firefighters.
Right. So I'm saying before they actually
I just gave you the answer, Nancy. I endorsed a number of recommendations that were made, and I was going to select their recommendation, and it ended up to the 2 firefighters.
I understand that. And Mr. Swinkowski, is it true that the current fiscal year budget includes 28 firefighters and 4 lieutenants? So now we actually have a discrepancy between the employment table recorded in the town budget and the actual number of employees in the fire department? So that's for this current fiscal year, not for next
Two
year.
new ones there, under that?
Let's see. The 1920 budget has,
No, I'm saying for this current fiscal year, so 18-19.
it has 28.
So 28 firefighters and 4 lieutenants, but now we've hired 2 more. So there's a discrepancy in the current fiscal year between our budget and the actual
Because we added 2
employment
people.
table. Yes, I understand. So
So
yes.
2 more people.
So yes, there's a discrepancy.
Well, we didn't know it at the time. When the budget was done, we didn't know that.
Right. So because we've hired people mid-year, which we're not supposed to be able to do, we now have a discrepancy in the employment table. Is that correct?
What employment table are you talking about?
The one that's reflected in our current
Back in the
fiscal year
budget?
budget. Yeah,
Yeah, we added 2.
we added 2. So our current employment is not the same as what's
Yeah, but
reflected in our budget.
that's turning around what I've said many times here. The fact that there was already money in the budget allowed us to hire 2 people, and I've said it at least 9 times already. It's not an incremental spend in this fiscal year because the money was already in the budget.
I know, I heard you.
So in terms of the employment table, yeah, there's going to be 2 more in this fiscal year, but it's not an incremental spend because the money's already in the budget. So
I
then,
think the issue is whether or not, right, we have a budgeted position, right? That's what we did. I guess we didn't say a year ago exactly what it was going to be for, but
No.
we said it was for the fire department, right?
So it's either or. Either a year ago, you
Right.
say this $140,000 is going to be used for these 2 extra firefighters, in which case it should be reflected in the actual
wasn't
employment
determined
table,
at that time, right.
or not. And if not, then we shouldn't be able to hire them this year. So,
Why do you say we can't hire them this year?
because Mike Frieda has said on numerous occasions that we cannot hire mid-year.
but we've had this discussion before.
Yes.
I told you, and I mentioned it in the past.
Yes, I understand.
That the difference is, when I said that at the time, there was X amount of dollars in the budget, not anything else. The difference is, we had $140,000 that was voted on by the taxpayers.
I understand.
To be used to fund a number of different options, one of which was 2 firefighters. That, I've said it time and time again.
Yes, I understand, but isn't this a slippery slope?
No.
In which, can't you just point to, all right, well, another department has made a request, and we're going to point to another generic line item that isn't specific in our town budget, that isn't appropriated funds, and we can just say, well, yes, we can hire 2 more people because we have this additional, I mean, this is not a specific appropriated line, right? Whatever it's called,
Pretty much was, yes.
I think
It
it's
was-
different
it was-
when a department head hires 2 people where there's an unbudgeted position, and the Board of Finance, who controls the budget for the town, tells a department head, we have money set aside, you may use it to hire.
it's a category called safety issues, so it's not specific to,
It was a
we're
bookmark,
going to
and it
hire.
was clear during the discussion and during the meetings what we were doing with it. And it was clear during the town meeting
That
what
was
we were
very
doing
clear.
with it.
We clearly explained it.
It was clear that you were going to do something with it. Exactly what wasn't clear,
But the
Right.
fact that it was there allowed us to hire the 2 firefighters.
right? I
So
know
it's not
that's
a
what you
slippery
used it
slope,
for.
Nancy, because in the future, if it happens again, which I don't think it will, but let's say there's another department, let's say it's the police department, and we allocate $140,000 for a analysis to be done about how we can enhance the department, that's the same consistency that we just did with the fire department. So it's not a slippery slope. It's the reverse. It is a very tangible way to control the spending and to earmark it towards a specific department if we choose to do that in the future.
I guess I could think of other.
But I guess in the future, then, maybe you should earmark that particular amount of money in the fire department budget, rather than in this strange safety category of safety issues under personnel policy issues. It wasn't under the fire department budget, right? It was in this other.
No, it wasn't, and we didn't put it there, we kept it outside, but I thought it was
Right.
clear.
It was
during-
originally in contingency.
I thought it was clear during
Carved out.
discussion what we were using it for.
It was very clear, I thought, for the fire
I think there's
department.
other examples you can make where, when you talk about personnel lines, it's big. Overtime is one of them, right? I mean, we may not be hiring an additional person, but I mean, when you go over your overtime budget, you're spending more on your payroll than you should be, right? There's an argument to be made there that the department's not supposed to do that, right? But it happens because we know it happens for a variety of reasons, and, as a board, we try and make sure that other lines are under, right? We've hired consultants, right? Is not a full-time employee, admittedly, but we talked tonight, just right, how we have a couple of consultants, right? So I only point that out because it's a little gray, right?
Sure.
Exactly what happened. But I mean, I guess nothing's perfect, and I guess I'm comfortable given the fact that, as I said a moment ago, they didn't hire them on their own and spend money that wasn't allocated to them. We had money set aside. It was for the fire department. We gave them permission to go and hire these 2 people, and they took it out of a line that was budgeted for a safety issue, which is not an employee per se, but it is a safety issue, right? So I guess that's what gives me comfort, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yes, just two other quick things. Related to the supernumeraries, I just went to the Board of Ed meeting just last week in which it was revealed that the Board of Ed is considering adding a second SRO, not a supernumerary, but an SRO at the high school. So I'm sure the police chief is going to be addressing this, but I'm just wondering, does the BOE pay for SROs?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't come out of the police budget.
Actually, I think you're wrong on that. It's not an SRO, it's a security person.
So again, the terminology is so interchangeable here.
No, you're incorrect on that.
They're referring to supernumeraries as SROs, even in our budget. The line item for 220 in the police department is called SROs, and in fact, it's supernumeraries. And the SRO that's at the high school, I believe, is a member of our police department.
Yes.
Right.
So that's different. And so an additional SRO at the high school, not a security person, but an additional SRO.
It's not the case, Nancy. It's not,
No?
it's not an additional SRO.
So it would be a security person?
Security person.
Okay. So that was my question.
Yes, there's nothing coming from,
Right.
nothing.
And that would be under the Board of Ed budget?
That would be under their budget.
Perfect, okay. And then lastly, perhaps Ms. Vesicchio can address this, again, with the Vanacore track. Again, I'm not going to talk about, the taxpayers paying for this twice. The issue is really the timing. The renovation of the track continues to be on the bid alternate list for the middle school building project, and there are cracks and uneven surfaces that even the Director of Public Works has pointed out as being a liability, and in fact, she included it as potentially a line item in her budget. And at the same time, as you all know, the two middle school gym floors need to be replaced, but that won't happen until this summer.
Correct.
So the problem is that my guess is you won't know until after that is completed whether there'll be any money left in the middle school budget to fix the track. Unfortunately, by that point, the track won't be able to be fixed starting at that point, because then the football team will need access to Vanacore Field, which is surrounded by the track. So I'm just wondering if there's any discussion
That's
between
really,
the two departments.
that's more Board of Ed.
No,
Well, I brought it to the Board of Ed's attention, so.
Until that gym floor is resolved, we do not know how much money will be left.
Right.
They're going out to bid.
Right.
Actually, right now for the floor.
So both projects represent liabilities not only for the Board of Ed, but for the town, and the Board of Ed actually had no input as to, which was the greater priority. So
Well, you had to take care of the gym floor.
No, I
because
understand.
You had to. There's a
Right.
liability. The kids are on that every day.
There's liability for both, but it won't be taken care of until the summer, right?
Right. Can't do it
So
while
then,
kids are
then the question is, okay, well, if the DPW doesn't fix the track at the same time that the middle school building committee is fixing the gym floor, then I'm not sure when the track could be fixed.
Let me just interject one thing to it. It doesn't need to be fixed. They just need to identify what the cost is. If it's going out for bid and they have a price, and hey, here's what it's going to cost to do the gym floor, even though it can't be done till the summertime, here's what's left, you have your number to work with. You don't have to wait till it's physically finished.
But is that true?
We are going out to bid.
Right.
The bid's got to come back. But, when you do any kind of renovation.
Right.
There could be.
There are extra costs.
There could possibly be, so I would not want to
And
say,
they're down to pennies
the
now."
bid number is this, and we're going to stick to it, because they could find something that they can't see when they do it.
Right.
Now, the discussion is with the middle school. Can they have the kids go outside? When the bids come in, can they have them go outside at the end of the year when it's nice? If they are willing to say, hey, we're going to not allow them in the gym, then maybe they could start early. That's a discussion.
Right. But you won't, what your position is, you won't know until the end of the summer when the gym floors are done, whether there will be money left.
When it's done, then we'll know how much we spend.
That's my point. And then lastly, legally, can the Department of Public Works legally oversee the contracted repair of the track, which is technically a school facility? Are there any union issues?
It would be overseen by the building department. I would think not so much Public Works, which is a part of Public Works. It's the town engineer that would oversee it.
Right.
It's our field anyway.
It's our field, it's a town field.
I know it's
not-
owned, but it's
The Board of Ed-
technically-
The Board of Ed doesn't own anything.
No, I know, I know, but it's technically school property, so.
It's
No,
town
it's not.
property.
Town property.
We cede control to them, is what we've done as a
As an
matter of.
entity.
Everything is
convenience,
town
really-
property.
Right.
So there's no problem with the Department of Public Works then, if it doesn't work out with the middle school building committee, if you run out of money and don't have money for the track, it would be feasible for the
Somebody has to
Department of Works.
oversee it and make sure that
And then it would
whoever
normally be the
would,
town
yeah,
engineer.
make sure
Okay.
it's in compliance.
Okay.
That's my only question. Thank you so much.
Any other public comment before?
Is it gymnasium reimbursement? I know, if you're talking about track, is not.
Unforeseen, yeah, it's part of it. It's strictly used for the school, so it should be reimbursable.
Is the gym more reimbursable or track is not?
Yeah.
Good evening. I'll try to be as quick as I can, Mr. Chairman. Sally Boehme, 5 Blossom Drive. I think what Ms. Barrett was referring to about union problems, her and I and others together were on an ad hoc committee from the Board of Ed for the turf fields, and lots of times during discussions about responsibilities for the fields, Mr. Diana?
Yeah,
He's
Bill
he kept mentioning, well, you got to be careful with who's doing what, because there's union contracts. Some work is done by union Board of Ed people and some by town. So maybe that's why she
That's me.
yeah. So, it came up a lot during our meetings, about the distinctions and problems with labor union agreements. So yes, the town owns everything, but there are Board of Ed fields that only Board of Ed people work on, and maybe that's what that was about. So I just wanted to throw that in for that. I just had a few things. I noticed no Quinnipiac University voluntary payment yet on page 2 of the revenue budget. We used to always get it in the fall. You're still confident we're going to get it? I watch it every month. It's late. Okay. We talked about that one. Ms. Fasicchio talked about the maintenance and repair. Oh, I wanted to ask about, on the expenditure budget, page 6, Mr. Swinkowski, the reserve accrued benefits is $128,000 over budget. Can you just review what that's quite
Yeah, that's to pay the people that have retired for their vacation and sick time that's been
Okay.
unused. But we never know who's going to leave and how much it's going to be, so we try to take a 3-year average. And
Okay.
this year, there are a few people that have left, and that's why it's over.
And is there any requirements that they give certain notice before retirement that would help us budget more appropriately for something like that? Because you're saying, we never know. Is there any?
Well, most of the people
Okay.
don't give that much notice. They
Okay.
give a month, maybe.
All right. And I wanted to talk about the resolution for setting up this debt service fund. I had the long version, in case anyone was
Yeah.
wondering. That's interesting conversation. It says, the first whereas talks about this GASB 54 requiring that the fund be formally established by the town's governing body. So would that be the Board of Finance? I hear governing body, I think more of the town meeting as a legislative body, but, I'm not as familiar with GASB regulations as you might be, Mr. Frieda. So when it says by the town's governing body, who is that?
Well, we went through bond counsel on this.
Right.
And he suggested to us that we have it voted on at the Board of Finance meeting.
Right.
So we followed bond counsel's advice, and that, tonight, we would be the governing body on that.
Oh, you understand my question. Normally, when we hear something like governing body or legislative body,
Right.
we think of the town meeting, and I noticed this didn't go to the town meeting. And I heard your explanation, Mr. Frieda, about how starting this fund, or creating it, I should say, would minimize debt and mitigate the impact of the debt. Where exactly would the money go, and has it gone without this line?
So.
I just want to understand why this
okay,
is.
go ahead.
Do you understand my question?
Yeah, we'll answer it for you.
So
Thank you.
what happens is when you have a debt issuance, the money goes into the capital project. Money went into the middle school, money went into the police department, paving, open space, et cetera. And in the fund, is the money that we asked for, plus the premiums. And the premiums are going to sit there because in each project, you can't spend more than you have the approval for.
Right.
So the premiums will sit there until the project's done and then just roll back into the general fund.
Okay.
So if we could use the money now, it would help us out debt-wise.
Okay. And when it says, the last whereas, when it says that the town will deposit these premiums into the debt service fund for this purpose, and I guess the purpose is what's listed up above for the payment of the debt service, and then it says she'll use the premiums for debt service before using other funds deposited into the account. That was the part. What are the other funds that could be deposited into the account, meaning the debt service?
Yeah,
I thought only the premiums were going in.
That's all that's going to go in there, right. There won't
Okay,
be
well, what are
anything
the other
else in
funds?
there.
So what does that mean?
It'll be strictly premiums, well, I guess maybe other places fund it from their budget and put money in it and set it aside. But we're not. We're just going to use the premiums that go in there, which are
Okay.
already sitting in the capital projects.
No, I got that, but it said use premiums before using other funds deposited into the account. But the way I read all the other whereases, the only money into the account was the premium.
Right,
So when it
that's all.
references other, is that just a safety net for the?
That's a catch-all, a term
Oh,
catch-all.
those darn lawyers, yeah, okay. It just seemed inconsistent with one of the previous whereases. And as far as the bid limits from 75 to 25, which does have to go to town meeting, right? What, you said the auditor requested it?
Recommended it.
Recommended. What type of, is that for administrative savings or because
spend
it's
a lot of
too much
time.
trouble for you?
No, not for me, but we spend a lot of time. The department's putting bids together and proposals. It just takes an awful lot of time and money to go out and do that. So
Right.
he says if you're looking at other towns, we're extremely low at
Okay.
7,500. So because he does a lot of municipalities in Connecticut, and he said he recommends that it be much higher.
So what percentage would you say are under the 25 that now would be going without bids?
What percentage? I don't know. It's hard to say.
I think
Okay.
the better question would be, what between 7,500 and 25,000, how many more bids would we just be able to authorize that we wouldn't have to go out to bid?
Right, that's
So,
what I
yeah,
meant
so
by
I
my
think
question.
Yeah, that's what.
You know, what percentage of that is the total? I'm just, are there a
Yeah, I
lot
don't even
that
really
are
think
under
there's a lot
20?
between that gap.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
Ed touched on something here, Sally, that's very important. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, the advertising costs when we go out to
yeah.
bid, we're going to save a significant amount of money by not having to advertise projects now that we
Right.
would normally have had to advertise, and the costs are very excessive here.
well, that's why my first question was it recommended to save on administrative costs?
Yes.
So if that
too, yeah.
seems, I was just,
Streamlines
wondering.
things,
Yeah,
for
okay, okay. But that has to be approved by a town meeting?
Yes.
Like, okay. And since we did discuss so much, not only Mr. Allahan during the regular part of the meeting, but your discussion with Ms. Barrett, I do have to touch on the hiring of the 2 firefighters. Again, I know that Mr. Frieda and I discussed it extensively at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And, I want to make it clear again why I brought it up at the February Board of Selectmen meeting. I was somewhat shocked at the announcement in December that seemed kind of sudden and just, this is it, this is how it's going to be. We're hiring 2 firefighters. I needed time to kind of rewatch all of the meetings before I started making any comments and questions. So that's why I waited a month before I brought it up in February. And I still, here's the problem that I have. And I understand the 140, which, is in the budget, but, you still did say in September, during a specific discussion, and by you, I mean Mr. Frieda, a very specific discussion of the 140,000. You did say at that meeting, and I'm going to read the whole quote one more time, we quote, "We cannot add full-time personnel during the middle of the fiscal year or at any time during the fiscal year because the referendum passed in May. The 140, meaning the 140,000, the 140 was put into the commission work group." So that's why I was surprised when in December, it was announced by Mr. Frieda and that there was no need for any long narrative, that you authorized the 2 people. And I was, a little surprised by that, basically. And I understand the 140 is in there. The problem is, when you hire 2 people, it goes beyond the 140 because it's an obligation of the taxpayers in perpetuity beyond just the end of this fiscal year. So that is, unless they stopped working at the end of the fiscal year, then yes, they would have only cost the town 140. But they're going to be in there in perpetuity. So the hiring in mid-fiscal year not only used up that 140 budgeted for, I'll acknowledge that, but it went beyond that. So that's why it bothered me. Something like that should have been in a budget, because we usually vote an employment table at the referendum in May. So that's why I had a problem with it. And I'm a little disappointed. I will restate what Ms. Barrett was saying, appreciatively of Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco's efforts during that whole process, but I'm a little disappointed that you both kind of caved in on the weighted day duty, which I still think was the best way and the cheapest way for the taxpayers to solve problems, which was what Mr. Hallahan was emphasizing. And it's unfortunate that, in my opinion, the fire union put the number of their members ahead of what was best for the town. And so there, I said it. And that's how I feel. And I don't know, maybe I fell asleep for like a month or 2. I wasn't really sure that you guys committed to hiring 2 per year for the next 3 years. I didn't know that was etched in stone already.
That's kind of a plan of ours right now.
It's a plan, okay.
And we would support that plan, but the plan is always potentially offset by what I said earlier on the state funding.
Right. Well, in December...
Nothing's done till ink's dry.
Okay. In December, when you announced that you were hiring 2 new people, I said at that meeting that we're almost boxed into a corner now to hire more because they're being hired and not on weighted day duty, which was the recommendation, to my surprise, of the work study group. But I just felt that it was improper to hire in mid-fiscal year, and I continue to have that opinion despite your disagreement with me, Mr. Frieda. Okay. I just wanted to know how the members of the Board of Finance felt that hire occurred without you guys voting on it.
We did vote when we presented the budget.
What do you mean?
When we presented the budget, you voted.
You recommended the 140.
Board members put the 140 in.
Right, but
every board member was aware of it.
Okay, but without any discussion or vote for the use of that money, you don't think that was necessary?
Fire Commission.
Okay. All right, and that's another thing I want to address. You said several times, Mr. Monaco, the Fire Commission makes the policy.
Yes.
Okay, but they only make policy with the money that you guys recommend and that the taxpayers approve.
Yes.
So last year they wanted 8 firefighters. You guys gave them 0. So they didn't just say, okay, we're going to hire 8 anyway because we're in charge of policy.
Well, they could.
To say...
Technically, they could.
And pay for them how?
The Fire Commission themselves would be responsible for the pay.
Personally?
Yeah, personally.
Well, Mr. Criscola would have to raise more money than he did for his drone.
Just so you know.
Okay.
What I just said?
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, but...
So, yes, if you'd like to ask them to pony up $300,000 or $400,000 apiece, they can...
That's an even better idea. Why didn't you put that in your report, sir? That would have been great. But to say that they are in charge of policy, they're in charge of policy with, you guys control the checkbook.
Yes.
All right, now I shouldn't say you control, the taxpayers control the checkbook. You recommend the checkbook to the taxpayers. They approve or disapprove of that checkbook at the referendum. Would you say that's correct?
Yes.
So to say that it's their policy, our hands are tied, I don't really buy that, because you can't effectuate policy without the money to do it. And let's see, I have one more thing. Where'd it go? No, I think I covered everything, but I do agree with Ms. Barrett that the employment table was changed after referendum, and I think that's improper. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Say happy birthday to my friend.
Excuse me?
28th. Very,
yes.
very rarely happens, so tell her
Yes.
happy birthday.
Oh, I will. Okay, I got it.
Anyone else?
Workshops.
I know, we do have the
We have
workshops.
the workshops, folks.
If you could make it quick, please, thank you. Only because we were supposed to start our first workshop at 7:30 and we're almost an hour late.
I hear you. Good evening, I'm Fritz Betker at 290 Spring Road. Since I have to make it quick, let me condense my long-winded version by vociferously echoing the sentiments of Ms. Boehme and Ms. Barrett. I, in my ignorance as a taxpayer, had a gigantic question about that $140,000 that miraculously transmuted to our obligation to keep 2 firefighters on for the next 30 years, which is a considerable sum. I think this is probably just something I don't understand about the process, but I and everybody I spoke with that about that had that exact same question, so I think that it is probably worth asking whether or not that is the most transparent way of doing something, and whether adherence to the process, as Ms. Boehme brought out at the last selectman meeting, might be the better way to go. Though I agree with the second selectman that being bound by process just for the sake of being bound by process is probably counterintuitive and not necessarily the best thing to do at all times. I'd be going, the difference between $140,000, which I thought we were going to spend, and the $10 million which you are now obligated to spend is significant as far as my relationship to my wallet goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So moved? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Stacy, would you like to step up to the table? Oh, you are, I'm sorry.
Usually it's Gary first.
Come on, you're fast. She's longer.
The alphabet, let's go with A. Let's go with sisters.
I lost Tim. They're not showing. Just within the, there's a sheet I think she gave us.
Okay.
If you can give me 1 minute. Just give Tim a second to get back here. Yeah, the weather put them off tonight.
Oh, yes.
Waiting on you, pal.
Start then. Here.
The registrars aren't coming tonight. We have a sheet that I think they sent us.
You did.
No, that's
Thank you. Mr. Johns, if you'd like to take us through your recommendation.
We have to present this, my budget to the Board of Finance. As you can see from my cover, I'm really not requesting any changes to line items, and in fact, I have a reduction of one line item for software, our administrative software that we use in the office, and no other changes other than that. The other, just to update everybody on our activity, the revaluation is currently in process. They're out in the field doing inspections. We will have preliminary numbers not until October, November. So it takes them, they have to do 100% inspection to the best of their ability, and then review the product process that they've done, and then with the sales numbers and so forth. So there's a lot to be done before then, but it's currently underway. So we've been getting a lot of questions from people, homeowners, with the inspectors coming to their door. we've had a couple of press releases in the paper notifying people that it is happening. All of the inspectors have their identification that they're wearing around their necks, as well as a letter from the assessor's office that includes their picture and a description of their car. So we're trying to, make people as comfortable as possible when they come to the door, but there is still, people are not expecting that. So sometimes they get a little bit concerned, and that's fine. When we talk to them, we try to reassure them, because we know there are only 5 inspectors in the field. They are all employees of Equality. They're not temporary workers. They're all, people we know. So it's, and each of the inspectors in the field have been vetted out with the Connecticut State Police for their background checks. The police chief requested that we do that, and that's no problem. We're more than happy to make sure that everybody's up to the job and not going to cause any problems.
I love your budget. Well, first of all, we'd like to move the assessor now to the first person ever done, so it sets a bar for the rest of the departments. 0 increase, or actually a reduction.
Increase, yeah.
Any questions for assessor?
Did you see how they kept their overtime under control here?
Any questions?
If you have any influence at all on the non-taxable educational institutions in our town, I know that our pilot and voluntary payment from Quinnipiac is based on their assessments, so please, by all means, enjoy their beautiful facilities. Make sure you know the quality of their finishes.
We do the best we can.
Very good.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary, just, it's not related to your budget. When do we finalize the grand list?
October.
No, no, it's finalized around February, doesn't it?
January 31st is the first pass.
Yeah.
The BAA meets beginning of March,
Oh, okay.
and then by May 1st, we have to submit the final.
Thank you.
Yes, and Mrs. Spinkowski, could we get a copy of the grand list detail, like we usually do? Thank you.
Stacy, please
If
step
you
up.
need it before he gets it to you, it's filed with the town clerk's office.
Thank you.
Stacy, before we start, we do have a sheet from the registrars.
Okay.
Which will, their numbers are clear. We'll deal with it during review of the final numbers of the budget. Yes, Stacy.
Good evening. Stacy Yarber, tax collector and town clerk. You have my budget request before you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I don't have anything to really submit beyond what I've already prepared. With regard to my line items, I can only say that for the tax collector's office, I have 2 line items going up, and those are in the request. One is for 500 and one is for 200. And town clerk's office, the grand total of my line item request is a increase of $50 for absentee ballots.
Anyone have any questions for town clerk tax collector?
I want to say thank you very much for having so many records available online.
I do it just for you. No, I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
No, it's been very good. The only little hiccup we've had lately is that COT has changed its public search engine, and so we've had a few hiccups. But otherwise, things are going very well.
Saves on wear and tear with the books, too.
Everyone good?
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Chief, you're up. Now, just because Gary gave us a deduct.
What's mine? I'm less than 1/2 of 1%, and I got a $5.5 million budget, so it's pretty flat.
You know how well I speak of you all the time. I've been convinced over the years that you must actually pay most of the taxes in town because your budget usually is the tightest of all.
Well, we try, you know. For anybody that doesn't know, this is Kevin Glenn, this is our new deputy chief, and he's replaced John Mulhern, who's moved on to Bradford.
Just to interject one thing, only because I heard it from some Branford police. I can't believe the changes, positive changes they've had in the short period of time he's been there.
Yeah, John's a dynamic leader, and I'm certain that he'll be a good chief there, if not there, somewhere. Yeah.
You tell him that I heard that.
Can we buy him back?
No, unfortunately. He's not in the budget.
He's not in the budget.
I always said I thought I ran fast. John sprinted, and Kevin here has got a cape. So we keep setting the bar a little bit higher. But again, good evening, and thank you for taking the time to hear us today and tonight. And as in the past, we thank you for your past support, and we look for your support for the next fiscal year. I think that the budget that was put together and proposed on behalf of the police department, it's, I think you'll find that it's very lean, it's very responsible. As of our submission date of December of 2018, when we put this together, our increase to our operating budget is approximately 0.5%. So that's about as flat as you can get with a budget our size. Not that we can take total credit for that. We have to be mindful that June 30, the police, the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement does expire, so we cannot anticipate what our adjustments might be if the contract is settled within the next fiscal year. Oftentimes, it's not settled until 18 months or longer. So we have to just take our number from last year and push it forward. And so that's, just being transparent. It's not that we're that good at what we do. If you follow over to our operations and maintenance for the next fiscal year, our personal line increase is it is not that great. We did have a contract settlement with the dispatchers, and that reflects a request of $21,384, and that's contractually driven. The two other items under our operations and maintenance that I would be looking to adjust would be our custodial contract. We expect our new building to be repopulated on or about July 1, and I anticipate that with the increased size of the building, we're adding roughly 10,000 square feet, that 10,000 square feet would need to be cleaned just like the existing. So working at our going rate based on the square footage, it's estimated that we will need an extra $5,084 for the custodial contract, and that is just to maintain the new building. I would think that maybe the next year or two, you might see some added increases that might go with the new building because it is larger. So we're not looking at anything right now, but just to kind of plant the seed, that might happen. We'd also like to maintain it and keep it new. I know that we've had some discussion in the past about some of the buildings in town and how they all came crumbling down at once, and we want to make sure that we stay on top of it and keep it new. So that's for down the road. I'm just planting the seed so everybody kind of knows.
So Chief, if I can interject.
Sure.
Your utilities lines you didn't move, I see. You can meet these, you think, even with a larger building?
I think we can keep it. I think we can. What I'd like to do, to be honest with everybody, is let's see where we are with it. I would rather come before the board, even if I had to come before the board late in the next fiscal year and explain that we're over for a particular reason. I don't want to just throw a dart in the dark and say that I'm going to definitely need this much more for water, electricity. or for gas. I think right now we seem to be running slightly under, and I think we can cover it. You know, even if we go over on one line, I think we can cover it with another one. And I'd rather come forward next year and say, hey, I'm 1% over or 1.5% over, and this is why, and then we can have some justification. I just don't like to throw too many darts in the dark and just play that guessing game.
Thank you, Chief.
The video recording lease, the existing video recording lease expires this year. The new lease that includes newer technology is been quoted at $5,500. It's a $2,000 increase in the current line. This is the video recording of persons that we're required to do, persons that we're either interviewing or interrogating that are involved in certain criminal matters, certain felonies. They have to be videotaped. You can't go into small rooms anymore and come out with any coerced, or, you know, not that it ever happened here, but, you know.
Now, do you have to keep this recording for?
It all can be, it could be turned over onto a disc. We can share it with the prosecutors or defense attorneys. So it's not going into a cloud, there's no storage for it. So it's all, we just put it on a DVD and we're good to go.
Okay.
And that's one new item that I'm looking for. So the three I just mentioned, one's the personnel that's contractually driven. The other two were things that we definitely know we're going to have some increases on with the building. New line item that I'd like to see is a line item that I like to title CALEA. Now, CALEA is the Commission of Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. This is, we're one of 7% of the police departments throughout the United States that is CALEA certified. It's national accreditation for the police department. CALEA, for the most part, it forces us, it forces any police department that is certified or accredited by CALEA to stay current. It makes you stay ahead of the curve. It increases your delivery of police service to your community, whether it be the residential community or to your commercial folks. And just as important, it provides some greater insulation to us on the legal end. When we have bad days, and we all do have bad days, especially in this business, you know, people look to sue us. They look to sue the police department, they look to sue the town, and when they find out that you are a CALEA certified department, there is some added insulation that they know that they aren't going to be going through your policy books, because they know that our standards are current, and so you know, there's good cause for this.
Chief, excuse me, what exactly, how do you become certified?
Actually, we have to open up our files, our existing manual, our duty manual, to auditors from outside of. We had someone come in from Illinois, somebody come in from Canada. There was where the third one came from. I think maybe there was one from the state of Connecticut, state police. They come in and they really rip you apart. They want to see what your framework of your policies and procedures are. What are your rules and regulations? What are your policies and procedures? And making sure that you are current. What's the industry standard? The industry standard is here, and you have to be at that level or beyond. There's, you know, a lot of departments, you know, tend to fly by the seat of their pants, and those are the ones that usually get jammed up. I've said in the past, I love the folks at the Department of Justice, I just don't want them in my building. Because when they start looking for things, then you have headaches. This keeps them out, and it's, but like I said, these people will come in there, they will force you to make sure that you are current. You'll have a review every year. We're going through a review right now. I think we just passed our first year review on that. They make us actually keep a copy or a proof that we are doing certain things. So it's a process, but it's a cost, and the cost is roughly $4,000 a year. But it's money, certainly money well spent. And like I said, it gives the police department a professional image, a delivery of service that is at the top of your game. It does provide some added insulation as far as the legal aspect of it. It's work. But you have to make sure that you are committed to it. So there's a financial commitment to it. There's a personnel commitment to it. We have somebody that needs to go to training. He's going to be going off to Alabama in March, and that's a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any active lawsuits now?
We do have a couple, but I wouldn't be privy to discuss them here.
I don't need to know about
But I expect that we're going to prevail on them. There's a theory that it's a deep pocket theory. If somebody doesn't like what we do, they're going to sue us because towns have money, right? Everybody thinks they have money, so everybody wants to just reach in and see what they can pull out. And unfortunately, there are, some attorneys that'll just go for the ride, and they'll see what they can get. Sometimes it's a nuisance suit, and the insurance companies would just assume pay a $10,000 payout and make it go away. But I'd rather just fight it out. But once it gets out of our hands, you can't do that. But we stand behind our guys, and our policies are tight.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that wasn't 4,000. That was 4,600.
Too late.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say that for the benefit of the finance director, because I know he holds me to those words. And then the other operations and maintenance issue is more or less, it's not a cost item. It's more of an adjustment or consolidation. It's more or less to alleviate some confusion. We have computer access cost, police department CAD, which is the computer-aided dispatch cost, and the mobile computer access. It all is paid to the same company, NextGen. So instead of having three separate items on our budget, I would just prefer to have one. So it'd just be like one line, just condense the three of them together. Because one always seems to be over, one's always under. So it's just easier to make it one bucket and just address it that way.
That's fine.
I'll move over to our capital request for the next fiscal year. It's basically the same as what we had asked for last year. We are looking for the 3 police vehicles. I like those to include the strip and install of the equipment. We noticed this past year that cost has creeped up on us, and it's taken a pretty big bite out of our vehicle maintenance line. It can get pretty costly. I've asked for 3 vehicles. I know in the past we've asked for 4 or 3, and it always seems like we're getting 2, but I think what happens is it's catching up with us. We have, if I take the 2 new cars out, the 2019 cars that we just are putting on the road right now that we just purchased, we have 15 other cruisers. Those 15 other cruisers combined have 1.1 million miles on them, or roughly 73,500, on an average, 73,500 miles.
Just breaking them in?
And, yeah, well, I guess that would be okay if we're going to the Big Y or Stop and Shop, but if they're going 80 or 90 miles an hour, not that they do that often, you don't want things falling off the car.
Are you staying with the SUVs? Or are you going
We are
back to-
staying with the SUVs, and I was able to, in that group of 15, I was able to, we were able to swing a deal during this current year, and kind of went against what I would normally preach. I always said I wouldn't want to put a uniformed officer in a used car, but we had an opportunity to pick up two 2016 Ford SUV Interceptor models like we have. They came out of Washington, D.C. They were government, they were police vehicles. Granted, they were 2.5 years old, but one had 12,000 miles on it, the other one had 15,000 miles on it. We picked up two cars for $39,000.
Were they retrofitted already?
Some of them did have lights and siren with them, so we had to dress them up a little bit more. And
What's it cost to do that?
it's expensive.
$8,000
Each
to
car,
$10,000.
yeah, it's about $10,000 to put a. You're going to put a video system in the on the dashboard. You have your lights, your siren, your computer. You have a cage. You have a prisoner transport. Not to mention any of the lights. So it's a $10,000 package. So when you turn around and you say we're going to spend $30,000 for a vehicle, it's more like $40,000.
Who does that, Wyman? Do we send that out to bid?
No, we have, we bid on the vehicles, and then there's a radio vendor that works for the town, has worked for the town for years. They put the equipment in the vehicle, and then we also have a radio vendor for the town public safety radio system. They'll put the radios in the car, but it's roughly $10,000, and sometimes even more. I'm probably being on the low end.
Now, when you retire a car, you take that equipment off and apply it to a new?
If we can. Some of it can, like when the Crown Vics, when we had all the Crown Victorias.
It was easy.
Everything was pretty much snap out, snap in. And then we went to the SUV model because they sunsetted the Crown Victoria model, and we had to buy new cages and new equipment for that. We try to salvage just about everything we can. But like, I have a watch guard system, dash camera that's probably 4 years old, and I was told today we need to replace it, and it's roughly $4,500 for that. So that'll come out of our vehicle maintenance. But it's expensive stuff, But we strip it out, we put it back in. So we do the best we can with that. But the cars are getting to a point where the 2222 has been catching up with us, and now we need to do something with those. And again, the laptops, it's been working out well where every 3 years, or, we're putting in, we're getting 3 every year. So by the time the computer actually needs to be replaced, we're cycling it through.
How old is the oldest laptop?
The oldest one, I would imagine, is probably 6 years old. And that's
That's old.
well, for laptops,
Yeah.
it's old.
Anybody consider, have they come out with iPads to use
They
in
have.
vehicles?
They have had them, but what we have to be careful too about is our collect system and how we Our computers that are in the cruisers are tied into what they call COLLECT. That's the Connecticut Online Law Enforcement Computer Terminals, or telecommunications, I'm sorry. You get your motor vehicle information, you get your driver information, driver history, you get wanted person information, Department of Corrections information. So there's a lot of stuff there that you need to make sure that you're wired into. So it's, for the cruisers, the laptop is probably still the way to go right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a question, I would say
Yep.
years from now, it'll probably be something like an
Well,
iPad.
we have somebody sitting next to me that actually talks into his watch. So I told you, he's got a cape. I don't know.
Is he recording now?
And in the body armor, again, we look to do these things on a smaller scale. Again, there's 50 of us at the minimum. People come and go. We'd rather not go and buy 50 pieces of body armor all at once. It's very expensive. If we can, we'd like to. We're on a cycle now of rotating them every 5 years. We're getting body armor in and out. So it's not a big hit every 4 or 5 years. And the emergency lights and siren package, we're looking for 2 of those just to keep current with that, because again, those things, they're on the outside of the police car for the most part, and they are exposed to the elements, and they tend to be damaged, and they need to be replaced. And again, to go back and get 15 of them all at once is a big capital purchase. So if we can do 2 or 3 every year, it's more affordable. Our 5-year plan basically follows that same pattern. As far as the other item that's in your packet is a police personnel, and it's under new. I'm not looking for any police officers, but one of the things that was discovered, I guess, in this Finance Board subcommittee and fire study was that we were shy some dispatchers. And in the past, we had looked to hire 4 dispatchers a couple years ago, and the economic climate just wasn't right, so we went with part-timers. The only problem with part-timers is part-time people have full-time commitments to other people, to their full-time employer. And we can only get these people in there for 19 hours at the most in a week. There's been some discussion apparently that the fire service would like us to return to doing the EMD, the emergency medical dispatch, which requires the dispatcher to stay on the phone from the point of they call it what do they call it, from cradle to grave, or something along that line. Okay, you take the call, you stay on the call, you give pre-arrival instructions, and at the same time, you can keep your EMS people that are responding current with anything that's changing. There's also some thought that if we were to have that done in-house, that it would also help the fire department perhaps with how their resources are deployed, and are they deploying the right people? Are we sending paramedics, or are we just sending EMTs? Currently, that's being done for us by AMR, and it's a no-cost item right now. All right, so what we're doing is we're picking up the calls, the 911 calls. If it's a medical call, we're kicking it over to AMR. AMR is triaging the calls and doing the EMD. So if there's a movement to go back to us doing the EMD, then we're going to need to have 4 dispatchers, or 4 new dispatchers, and 2 on the day shift and evening shift all the time. As one of our residents had mentioned earlier, added dispatchers don't save you any money. If anything, it's going to increase your costs. You're going to increase your costs for the new hire, and you're going to increase your costs for replacement of that person. Because if you need somebody on there all the time, when somebody's off sick or on vacation, there's going to be a replacement of time and a half. So just as a point of transparency, this isn't a cost saving by any means. This is going to be an increase in the personnel line. There'll be an increase in overtime and training as well.
Will these dispatchers be under your department or the fire department?
Yes, his department.
Yeah, well, you know what, if the fire department wants them, they can certainly have them.
They'll operate out of your facility?
No, I would, if they're under, if they run under us, they can stay with us. If they're gonna run out of the fire department, I think that their watch desk is more than capable of handling somebody to sit there. And then there wouldn't be any mistakes made if there was one of their people doing their dispatch.
Being state certified, that means they have to be qualified?
Yeah, there's there is training that goes with it. They have to be state certified telecommunicators. They have to go to training for roughly 7 or 8 days initially, followed by some 911 training, and followed by some form of training. We've been using a vendor called PowerPhone, and it basically it just gives the call taker, the dispatcher, an idea of how to answer the call, how to triage a call, and then there is some follow-up training.
So they'd be operating similar to the fire department, 8-hour shifts, 3 shifts, and 1?
No, they would be similar to the police department. We don't work 24-hour shifts. We work 3 8-hour shifts. So there would be 2 on days, 2 on evenings. 1's remaining on midnights. There's no need to have 2 on midnights. That quite frankly is a waste of money. But just as a point of interest, we do have just 1 full-time dispatcher assigned right now. The part-timer does come and go, but again, 19 hours. And there's no guarantee that they're there all the time. 40 years ago, 1978, I dispatched police cars and fire trucks here and ambulances, and we had 1 dispatcher. So we haven't moved too far off that dime in 40 years.
So Chief, how many dispatchers do you have right now?
I have 4 full-time dispatchers, and I have 3 part-time dispatchers. I'm looking to hire another part-timer, or perhaps 2, because I do have the funding available for that.
And is the 4 new full-time only if the fire department starts taking 911 calls, or do you get absent that evening?
If I would say that I would say that to answer that question would be if you had the fire department doing EMD or requesting to have the EMD done, we would definitely need to have the 4. Mm-hmm. Without that occurring, I could operate with probably 6 part-timers plus my full-timers.
So you have 4 full-time now and 3 part-time now?
Mm-hmm.
And this would be another 4?
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something? Rick?
No, I mean, the whole idea of the 4 full-timers is the majority of the time they're picking up medical. Sergeants are responsible sometimes, I assume, when dispatchers are tied up. It just adds a layer of redundancy that they need. I don't see any way of you not getting 4 dispatchers. I like it staying with police. I like your schedule. The equipment's there. I like it being in-house like that. I don't make that decision, but I do. I think it makes sense to keep it as part of your uniform service.
Yeah, now, right now, your budget does not include the 4
No, it
additional.
doesn't.
No.
And that the 4 additional, the total on that would be with benefits? What do you believe?
He's
My
got it on the
estimate-
sheet of 75,
Yeah,
but I
there's
think
an
it might
estimated
be
cost there.
plus a little overtime.
No, well,
Or 75 is covering us all everything, you think?
yeah, I'm just, I'm going at the new rate. The new rate of plus their benefits comes to roughly $74,491. So I rounded it up to 75,000 for easy counting. But I didn't put anything in there for their training or overtime because, you know, I always try to do the best to keep my overtime there. And again, I'd rather run it tight and run it to a line where I come before the board and say, listen, I can justify a need to increase something because here's the numbers. Again, I don't want to guess and just inflate a number and play a guessing game like that. I don't think that's the right way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, in our study group, you gave a very good demonstration of some of the tasks that they perform and the scenarios they go through, and I have no idea how you can do it with the people you have now. So, God, get us some people quick.
Anything else, Chief?
And I think that is it.
Any questions for the Chief?
The switchboard issue, in the new building, are you going to have some nice equipment that's going to be able to accept non-emergency calls on different lines, different dedicated lines, and be able to transfer calls easily to the people in the rest of your building, so that you're not using dispatchers the way you are now?
Yeah, I think I looked at some type of a program. I think we talked about having a way where we could
Go direct to records, go direct to,
Right.
yeah.
having some type of a, you know, if this is a 911 call, like a lot of places have after hours. If this is a 911 call, you know, or emergency call, please hang up and dial 911, and then it'll go through it'll prompt you through a series of things. If this is you're looking for the office of, you know, the patrol commander, you know, this, and just go down the list. That's probably the best way to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
One question, Chief. How many dogs do we have now?
You have 2. We have a shepherd that is, well, actually, we have Coda is a yellow lab, and she is roughly 9 years old. And by dog standards, I guess, you know, because of what she does every day, she's getting ready to retire. Then we have a shepherd that is approximately 2.5 years old. Both dogs, the shepherd is cross-trained for tracking and crowd control, as well as some narcotics. The other one is strictly drugs.
And you're still not allowed into the high school?
Right now, we don't go into any of the schools. If they ask us to come in, we'll come in. You know, we'll go in and do a demonstration for the kids. We're doing something, I think, at the end of February in one of the elementary schools. But it's always got to be careful because, you know, I always like the request to come from the school itself and not necessarily a PTA or a parent, because you don't know who's allergic to what. You know, it seems like these kids today everybody's got some type of a allergy of some sort, you know?
Say no more.
By the way, the animal shelter, is Hampton building one?
I'm hoping they are. I don't know, it's kind of a sore subject right now, but I think I think our relationship there is probably coming to an end.
Did our building got a little bit of a remake, right? A little bit of a facelift?
Yeah, and it's going to need a little bit more. You know, our animal budget, for the most part, is flat. There's not a whole lot there.
How many do we have in the shelter?
You have what, as far as the animal control officers? You have 2.
2, and how many animals are we?
Well, we have
14 kennels.
There's roughly 14 kennels, but they're not all populated, and they come and go. Quite frankly, I think they do a pretty good job adopting a lot of the animals out of there. They just started something recently where they're reading to the dogs like once a month. They have people coming in. Let me tell you something. It's a pretty popular thing. People come in, they sit down, they read to the dogs, and it's you know, but it's
for fiction or nonfiction?
but it's a pretty interesting thing. But you know, over the course of the past couple of years, one of the things that we have had been able to do is to benefit through the agreement that existed with Hampton, was that they paid us for the dogs that were there, for kenneling their animals, and we were able to basically hold our line and take that money and put it into our shelter. Presumably, if they're not there next year, we might have to address that with the board, but that's down the road.
Yeah, so I see in the vehicle repairs that it's pretty much stayed flat. Why do I think that there was a problem with that vehicle, maybe?
The animal control?
Yeah.
We replaced it. We replaced that vehicle.
Right.
All right.
Has roughly 150,000 miles on it, or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just want to say that we're all proud of the way you operate your department, and very impressed with the way you manage your budget.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
We try.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
But then again, Gary Johns did bring in a decrease.
Out this time,
So,
Tom.
maybe a close second.
That's all right. I'll see him tomorrow.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.